I'm not pregnant, but I have back issues.
Well, I am pregnant and I'm winded, so together we'll make a great combo.
Yeah. I'm going to be 40 next year.
Very exciting.
And I went to the gym today and I was like, ooh, that's a new muscle that I haven't felt in a while. And like, is this just my life now where I have to be so intentional and meticulous about certain things, or my back is just gonna like tweak on me?
I think you look great.
Thank you.
So
Looking
that
and feeling are two different things.
I understand. I'm just impressed you have time to go to the gym.
Well, maybe we'll talk about this today, but I'm going to talk about that when I go into your community because that's where the magic happens. So
All right, I'm
we'll
here for
dive
it.
in. But this is how I start podcasts. We just hit record, we dive in, and we have emotionally uncomfortable conversations.
Great. I'm an open book.
Yay. So Lily, welcome. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to being emotionally uncomfortable. Um, I found Auggie, and we'll talk about Auggie in a little bit. I was doing some research, but your reels kept popping up in my explore page.
Great.
And although I'm not raising young children, I was just so blown away by the community that you've created. And so I did my research and I found you, and I love how you show up in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here.
So we had a previous conversation, and I always love to know like what keeps people going. Like the things people don't see behind the scenes, like the why behind the why. And you were telling me a story about a health scare that you
Yeah.
had when before mothering, before all the things. And so I
Yeah.
wanted you to dive a little bit into that because I think it's really important to understand this is like where like the essence of humans to me are born. And so I want to dive a little bit into what that was for you, that journey.
Yeah, of course. So picture late 20s living in New York with my new fiance. We had gotten engaged a month before, and I'm getting a facial. And during that facial, the facialist said to me at the beginning, which I was like, you couldn't have waited until the end. Have you ever felt this lump before? And it was a lump in my neck. And I was like, no. And I went home to my fiance and I was like, this facialist said this thing to me. She was basically like, I feel necks all day, every day. I'm not a doctor, but if I were you and you haven't gotten this checked out, I would go to the doctor. And so I
Mm.
told my fiance that, my husband now, and he was like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't feel anything. But obviously, if somebody says that to you, you take it seriously. And so my mom and I, the next week, went to the doctor. I was expecting it to be like a swollen lymph node or not, nothing. I had no, like, I went into it being like, this is going to be nothing. And at that appointment, he was like, yeah, like I see a mass, and it was the size of a tennis ball. And
Wow.
you couldn't see it from the outside, but it was protruding
Wow.
in. And that started an entire new journey for me. Doctor appointment after doctor appointment, biopsy after biopsy. The tumor was so large that they couldn't even really decipher what nerve it was on. And so
Mm.
we found out it was benign. Um, However, they thought it was on the vagal nerve, which controls your speech and your swallowing. And
Mm.
because it was so large, they thought that I was going to be impacted for life from a vocal standpoint, and they thought I need speech therapy and thickened liquids. And I
Mm.
laugh now, but I wasn't in, it wasn't until I was in the recovery room of the hospital, like I needed a neurosurgeon, I needed an ENT surgeon, that they were like, it was so big, it was actually like not on the nerve we thought, and like you're going to be completely fine, you just have like a little bit of a droopy eye that can be fixed with surgery. And it
Wow.
was just
And
like a mind fuck.
so how long was that gap of like hey, you have a lump, to we don't know what it is and we don't know how big it is or if it's benign or not,
Two
like
and a
time
half
wise?
months.
2.5 months.
Yeah,
So you got it removed completely
got it removed completely.
and
Re-
didn't worry about it after that. Like nothing came back.
Nothing came back. I had the eye surgically fixed. I mean, it was my wedding year. Although I still think it is a little droopy. We can let the listeners let me know. Um,
Of course, you're going
and
to be so self conscious of it, like staring at yourself.
exactly.
Yeah.
And um, I had to go back every year for a really long time, but no,
Mm.
completely fine. I know, which compared to your journey, it's like such a bullet dodge, but it was in a weird way.
Comparative suffering.
Yeah,
Comparative suffering. Oh, well, compared to. Yes. We're not going to go there.
great.
This is your experience. So let's talk about the 2.5 months.
Yeah,
I want to know what that emotional journey was like for you, of like before you had answers.
yeah. I learned in that moment that with trauma comes different people reacting in different ways. And for me, I get completely calm. One thing that would happen would be at night, as we do, I would be laying down and spiraling a bit. And so I worked on that. I think it's like a Navy breathing technique, like the 4 breaths in, hold for four breaths out. And that was game changing for my nervous system, for how I was able to process it. Um, the first MRI was the hardest part of the experience because I never had an MRI before. It's loud, you can't move, it's very claustrophobic. I like didn't think that I could do it.
Mm.
And my mom, who's the opposite of me, was like, "Do I have a lorazepam?" Like freaking out, throwing things out of her purse. And I was like, "You know what? Just do your breathing, go in, knock
Yeah.
this out." Um, and I did. You know, I I often remember thinking about my husband or my fiance, just being like, God, this is unfair for him if this turns
Mm.
into something worse than what it was. And his mom had health issues for a really long time and was coming off of her own surgery.
Mm.
Um, and so actually, like getting that facial, I remember being like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to write him like a goodbye letter. Like that's where
Oh,
my head went.
yeah.
Um,
It's interesting when you tell me about like your reaction, like you learn a lot about yourself when you're in these moments and you kind of like just calmed right down, like the calm and the chaos, but it sounds like you went internal
I went
and like,
internal.
yeah, and like very reflective. Do you feel like time slowed down and like you had to focus, or did you feel like you had to be this calm, steady rock for everybody else? Like what was happening with that, of like other people's reactions, or were you managing your quote unquote energy or emotions for everyone else, or was that, I'm curious if you knew of any, like your reaction to that.
Yeah, my mom's a psychologist, so you would think that like she would be the best type of person in this scenario. And I think that what happened was it felt like me and her against like the world. She reacted kind of with a little bit of chaos, which I
Mhm.
completely understand because, I'm her daughter. But I did feel like because of that, like I saw what I didn't want to be. And so I
Yeah.
felt like I had to be calm, but also I wanted to be calm for myself. I was running another business at the time. I had to show up for employees still every day, for customers still every day, and pretend like everything was okay.
Mm.
Uh but
Isn't
yeah,
that wild though? How we, well, number one, so I remember during my diagnosis, I almost had the exact same reaction to you. And part of like, I'm like, I gotta act the part. I have to look at like I'm the strong one. But it is very reflective when you see people reacting differently and you're like, I don't want to be like that. Like that is not how I want to show up in the world. That's not how I want to lead. I talk a lot about this, like energetic leadership, like the emotional energy management of how we show up, how it affects our teams, how it affects our relationships, our parenting, all of that.
Yeah.
So fast forward, you're healthy, things you're just what tell me that moment if you can remember it when they were like it's benign. Like we don't
Yeah.
know how it got here or what happened, but it's benign.
That was obviously the biggest relief. And then immediately into it's benign, and it's going to impact your life in other ways that ultimately it didn't. But I went through those 2+ months thinking that it would. And acceptance and just being like, okay, you got no choice but to live and let live.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw the best doctors in the city and we met with different people before making the decision to choose the surgeons that we did. I remember being like very thrown off. It just felt like a much more intense surgery. The fact that like I also needed a neurosurgeon. I was like, wait, this is brain. It wasn't brain surgery, but because of
Right.
nerves and everything being connected, I needed that surgeon in addition to my ENT. And so that made it feel like a much bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember being actually, I don't really remember this, but my husband does, like being in the recovery room and he was there. And, that's also an interesting moment because he was my fiance. So of course he should be there, but like it wasn't my mom as the first person I saw waking
Mm-hmm.
up for surgery. I think that was a big deal for my mom, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Like Samson, my husband, went in first and he said, so good news is that it's not what they thought it is. And the reality is, like, you may just have this droopy eye. And I guess my reply was not ideal. That's what I said to him, but I don't remember that.
Okay, and what I can empathize with your mother,
Yeah.
and I can also I've never been in that situation, but to just imagine like your child is in pain,
Yeah.
right? And that like instinctual fear of failure. And also, when I say failure, it's like loss,
Yeah.
but also within yourself, it's like you do still have some control. Like you have some control over managing your energy or your emotions or like your breath, like you
Yeah.
said. But those that care about you on the outside being reactive, um, and feeling out of control because they can't control that scenario. Like reflecting back on my own situation, I remember watching my parents in different seasons of my
Yeah.
recovery. And in the moment, I didn't give a shit about what they were dealing with, like at all. I was very judgmental of their behavior. And I was like, go to therapy. I don't have time for your shit. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm always the strong one, but right now, that's not who I can be for you. I don't have the energy and capacity. And I was angry. I was like, get your shit together. But it was very, very eye opening. But never once in the moment did I think, I'm the child. No wonder why this is happening. I just thought, get your shit together. So
Yeah.
any angers or resentments I had towards my parents got 10 times bigger.
I think that makes complete sense. And why would you
Yeah.
be thinking like that in the moment?
Yeah. So it's just wild when life throws these things at you. So fast forward, so how long ago was that and where you are today? And I'm curious how you kind of bring those lessons into, as you're building your business and your company and all the other things. And now you're a mom and about to have another one.
About it may happen on this call, we were saying.
Exactly. I don't want it to happen, but that would be
That
such
would be
a fun experiment.
that would be good content.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was 2018. I was 27. I got married the next year, had a blast, got the droopy eye fixed. Um, Sold a business that I was running at the time. I had run that business for 9 years in April of 2023, and then quickly after started Augie and had a son who's about to be 4, and I'm
Mhm.
pregnant with another boy. And I would say how that, I know, a boy mom, how that experience impacted this business particularly, and I think just like parenting in general is just like not everything is a big deal. Like
Yeah.
it taught me that how I react matters, and that if I treat everything like the end of the world, then that is one, emotionally draining, but two, like, not true. Like,
Yeah.
you have obstacles thrown at you in life, and it's how you dodge them and show up to the world that really matters. And I think that definitely, it's interesting because, like, one of the other hardest things that I've had to do in my life is fundraise.
Yeah.
And with the mindset of like nothing really does matter except health and family, it
Mhm.
really helped me during fundraising, like stay level.
Mhm.
Because if I got emotional during fundraising, which is a completely not personal thing, like you get 100 no's to get one yes, the stereotypes and the rumors are real.
Mhm.
If you were to take all of those rejections personally and emotionally, it would just set you back. Um, so I hate
I
to sound. Oh, go ahead.
No, 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 go. What were you gonna
I was just
say?
gonna say, I hate to sound like, oh, nothing matters, but like, really,
Mhm.
if you step back and think about what actually matters, for me, it's two things: my health and my family and friends.
Yeah, when I'm like in it, when I'm like suffering, like I remember during my diagnosis, like checked this mental box and I was like, I will never get to this point again. But I could feel this like I am done suffering in my life. And
Yeah,
I often find when I'm struggling the most, or I'm like, I'm stuck, like I feel like I'm beating my face against a wall, or I just now I'm like, step away. It's not that big of a deal.
yeah,
Like, let's look at the bigger picture. You are like a tiny sand on this big earth that's like floating in the sky. Honestly, what are we making? We're like, oh, people are going to judge me, or I'm afraid of rejection. And I'm like, look at the bigger picture. Like, we're thinking too small.
yeah. That resonates 100%, and you just like put me back into the mindset of, we worked with the amazing Red Antler, a branding agency, to build our brand, and we spoke a lot about what we wanted Augie to represent. And of course, I understand parents out there being like, parenting is so hard. I'm not here to deny that it is. But one thing that I wanted to come across with the brand, because it's how I truly feel about being a mom, it's like, it's such a gift. And like, yeah, of course there's hard times and you need camaraderie and you need commisery and you need all the things, but I never wanted to paint parenting in this like way of being a burden, because that's not how it felt to me. Like, I feel lucky to be able to be a mom, and I feel lucky that I get to spend intentional time with my son, and have this baby, that I didn't ever want it to be like parenting is so, like, is such a burden and so hard, if that makes sense.
I
uh
think that's why I was attracted to your mission and message, because when I was a young parent and I was seeking community and mentorship and like female role models, I just saw this connection through suffering, like this belonging through
yeah,
suffering of like martyrdom and how hard it was. And I was like, yes, we are all experiencing similar challenges very differently, of course, through our own lens. But is there solution? Is there any
yeah,
solution orientation here for us to be able to thrive or have opportunities, or let's have those uncomfortable conversations so that we can change this cultural conversation?
yeah.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about like the default parent at Augie and who that is. And the definition that we give it is the parent that carries the majority of the mental load. And that is a really hard responsibility. And it
Hmm.
takes time and it takes commitment and it takes resources. But at the end of the day, it's also, I mean, we don't need to get political here, but like, for I'm hesitant to say a choice to become a parent, because that's
I'm like,
not the case.
we can make it political.
Yeah, that's not the case for everybody, but it's like, let me speak from my perspective. It was a choice for me to become a parent, and I know that's a luxury and not the case for everyone, especially in this country we're living in today. But
I think there is decisions though, in the sense of like maybe not decisions about parenting, but acceptance of this is what it is, right? Like this, when we accept our situation, it's not that it becomes easier by any means, but there's no push pull towards it. There's
yeah,
like a surrender of like, this is my life. How can I co-create with it to, for me, the way that I see it is how can I co-create with my situation instead of pushing against it and being in denial, or to surrender and ask myself, how good can I make this situation? And
yeah,
sometimes it's not as easy as just making a decision, but it's more of, um, there is like some really uncomfortable conversations or deep grief work or something that needs to happen.
yeah. And I'm not saying like it's the trauma that I went through, but I also like before having kids was one of those people that felt like I was put on this world to like be two things, an entrepreneur and a mom. And
Mhm.
then I had my son and I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, I don't even like you. I'm so depressed. Like, this is the opposite of what I thought parenting would be. And I got rocked in the postpartum days in a way that I never expected. And I think coming out of that, which by the way was like all Zoloft, thank God, and I'm not going off of it this time, and I feel so different. Um, but coming out of that haze also gave me a different perspective about who I wanted to be as a mom. Like when I finally got there and I was like, wait, I'm actually obsessed with my son and I love this new role,
Mm,
that helped set the
yeah.
perspective and the foundation of what I wanted Augie to represent. So I'm so glad it comes through to you.
Yeah. I also just think telling your story, because so much of it is invisible. And I know when I started the podcast, it was called Mom is in Control. And
Yeah,
people are like, why'd you start? Da, da, da. And I was like, because I felt like I was screaming from the rooftops. Like, am I the only person out there? Why is everybody else walking around making it look like this is easy?
yeah,
Because I'm really, really struggling. And then, of course, I'm sure just like you, when you start using your voice, other people are like, me too. Thank you for saying something. I've been hiding in silence and
yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. For me, I'm such an open book that like when people don't talk about it, I'm like, why aren't you talking about it? Like,
Yeah.
but it's hard to. We actually just interviewed the author of The Motherload, this woman Sarah Hoover, on a virtual event for Augie, and she basically wrote a book about how like she hated being a mom in the beginning, and she
Mhm.
was like, you can't even understand the amount of people that have come out of the woodworks to say that they felt the same way. And I'm like, well, if we're all feeling this for the most part, like, why are we being quiet about it? We're
Yeah.
not being quiet about other things. So is it a weakness thing? Is it a vulnerability thing? I don't know. I think that, yeah,
I think it's shame and
shame.
vulnerability. Like I talk there, it's interesting because people will come into my world, and although parenting is a huge part of the values of what I do and why I do what I do, when I started my business, I was really just focused on parenting. And
Yeah,
now what I see is when people work with me, they'll say, I want more time, I want more energy, I want to make more money. And then we get into the conversation and the layers start to be pulled back,
yeah, the why.
and they start to ask questions about their children, or they start to ask questions about mental and emotional well-being or their marriage, or I think we all have these corners that like you just keep sweeping things into. And it's easy to buy strategy. It's easy to buy pretty things that you don't really need to invest that much time or energy into. But when you start to connect yourself with communities and people that are honest, they're
Yeah,
not always going to have the same beliefs or values as you. But when they are honest, you got to look in the mirror, you got to feel it, you got to lean in, you have to have uncomfortable conversations and really dive into the healing work. So I'm
yeah.
curious, like, you had intention and a personal why behind starting Augie.
Mm-hmm.
What has surprised you being on the other side of and into it now?
That's a really good question. I would say, like, kind of going off what we were just talking about, how many people feel like they're in this alone. Meanwhile, like, we've been doing this since the beginning of time. We are
Yeah.
not alone. You are not alone, regardless of what you're feeling. It's valid. Um, I would also say that Augie was built on the premise that parents love to share with one another. And what's been really interesting in talking to like thousands and thousands of the default parent over the last like 2 years is that she, and I'm saying she because in the majority of hetero relationships, the default parent is the woman, um, loves to share with her friends and be helpful. But there's also an emotional thing that happens when a parent shares a recommendation, and it's that somebody else takes their advice. And
Yeah.
I think what Augie is doing really well is like almost in some ways gamifying the validation that goes into the mental load that often goes unnoticed, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
think
it
just,
gives women meaning or purpose, or like
yeah,
that their suffering or all of that headache and sleepless nights wasn't completely worthless, and they can make an impact by helping somebody else.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the invisible pat on the back when somebody else takes your advice.
I feel like there's definitely psychology behind it, but there has to be some primal human. I think we just all want to be valued. We all want to
Yeah,
feel valuable, like we're making an impact in the world, especially women. Because I can only talk from my perspective, but I know in my community, we have something we call mentors. So people will go through my process. And at first, like these were women that didn't necessarily want to do the work that I do, but they would say things to me like, I just want to give back. Like,
yeah,
this has completely transformed my life. And I wish I had this years ago. And so they just start helping other people in the community naturally. And I'm like, this is the power of women in community.
yeah.
This is like, you don't have to force it. You get them together. And this is the magic. This is the strength.
It's funny that you say that because I live in a building in Brooklyn that has like 23 apartments, and I think 20 of us have kids under 4. And it's
Mm.
a really unique case study because I was pregnant and I went into the experience being like, I'm going to introduce my son to everything, which I try to do. Dolls, pink, gender, like, okay, yeah, he's a boy, but like that doesn't mean that he has to be like a quote unquote, act like a quote unquote boy. And they're just, and I'm probably going to get shit for this, there is a difference even at this young age between the boys and the girls in our
100%.
building.
100%. Yeah.
And you fast forward now to where I'm at, or even where you're at in life. I'm sorry, there is a difference between the men and the women, the moms and the dads. The moms have, like what you were saying, the desire to want to give back, and it's because we're doing the majority of the work. And I didn't want to believe when being pregnant with a son that women and men were different.
Mm.
But I have a case study in my building. I see it every day. Of course, there are outliers. But fast forward to where we are now in our lives. Men in my life are dads, women in my life are moms. I am sorry, there is a clear division of
Yeah.
responsibility that happens. And I don't know if it's because we want to take on more. Like, I'm not placing the blame on men. Like, I don't know if I'd want to do less, but what I do often want is the recognition that I'm doing more. And that
Mm.
often comes from my mom friends. Um,
So I have a completely different take on this.
Tell me.
Part of it is because I'm raising three boys
Yep.
and I'm the only woman in the home besides my mom who lives with us.
I hope you have a girl dog.
I have one female dog. Yes, I have
Wonderful.
two dogs, one female dog. Um, So I had this belief going into parenting that, like, obviously I understood the female brain and the male brain show up differently in society. Like biology wise, very like we can multitask. The male brain typically cannot multitask. They're very singular focused. They're very like primal, and we're primal too in our own ways. And then we have cultural standards and expectations of like provider roles,
Of
nurturer
course.
roles. So I understand that more now, but it was at certain points in my boys' developmental behavior where friction in parenting because of my expectation of I know best, you need to parent the way that I'm
Hmm.
parenting, but also my son needs to be a certain way. And I actually have a few colleagues that are all about like the boy brain and education and how they learn and how they're more physical and they need to be more active and all of that. And I remember one of my friends, because she's a friend and a colleague, and she kept calling me out. And she was like, Heather, Brian, who's my husband, he is not supposed to parent the way that you parent.
Yeah.
And just because you read the book and you think that this way is right, that's not how he's going to show up in his parenting. And also, what you think your boys should do versus the male brain and how they're growing is completely different.
Hmm.
And there's the awareness of this, and then there's the surrender that me as
Yeah.
the woman, even though my primal role and instinct is to nurture, does not mean that I need to control everything. And it actually forced me to heal some of my hyper independence and some of my trust issues with men. It was wild. Raising boys has I wouldn't say completely healed me,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
it has put me down this path of truly looking in the mirror when it comes to how I show up in the world and how I have complete and utter disrespect for a lot of men because of how I've been treated. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of women carry these wounds. And we're just completely taking the power away from men in the role that they are supposed to play as well. And we are over nurturing, over mothering. And then yeah, I can get on a soapbox about this because it's like, I'm carrying so much. And I'm like, but women are allowed to talk about what they're carrying, men are
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a check-in in like 10 years once I have two boys under my belt about uh, how the experience has changed my mindset.
Every new developmental phase is
Uh,
another adventure.
great.
So, Lily, I'm so grateful for this conversation. So, tell everyone where they can learn more about you, learn about Auggie and the magic you're creating in the world.
I will. So Augie is a platform for parents to connect. We then pull all the recommendations that parents share and make them discoverable in our shop. And then we have wonderful virtual events. You can find us at Augie,
Yeah.
AUGGIE.com. And we hope that wherever you are in your parenting journey, that
Yeah.
Augie makes you feel seen.
And you have an app as well.
It's an app. You can get the link to download the app in the App Store by typing in Augie or by just going to Augie.com. And then we're Join Augie on social, where Heather
Awesome.
found us.
Yay. I
Yay.
think it's also a great resource. Like, even if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I'm out of that phase or I don't need that anymore. Just thinking about the new parents in your world as well. Or even when I always tell people, I'm like, you may find something valuable, but realize going back to what you said of how we just want to share resources with each other. You just never know the impact you can make by letting someone know about availability of a resource.
Definitely. And I often say, like, it's for the parents who are in it from the parents who have been through it. So the
Yeah.
wisdom of those that have been through it is actually really valuable to the newer parents. So don't be
Awesome.
shy.
And something that I'm noticing in my community is the parents that are coming that are now grandparents.
Love
And
it.
yes, and they're like, now I'm doing the work that I wish I had access to when my kids are younger. So we're just all here to walk each other home and support each other.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks, Lily.
Thank you for having me.